My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy, and I thank you so much for joining me for tonight's edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. Before I get into the questions for this evening, I just wanted to share our agenda. First, I'll tell you a bit about the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, then about office hours. And from there, we'll jump right into questions from our community. We're talking about the return to repayment, loan cancellation, and then the limited PSLF waiver. And we have a major deadline coming up on October the 31st. So it's really important to get all those questions answered about the limited PSLF waiver so that as many people can get into the pipeline as possible. As always, if you have any questions during this evening's broadcast, please do drop them into the Q&A. I will take a look periodically to make sure that I'm addressing everyone's questions. So, about the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, we were founded in 2021 with a vision to help students and families build their financial life skills and empowering them to thrive. That vision is for all college and career students in the state of Maryland. And our vision is for all of these students to have the opportunity to become creditworthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. So we're doing a lot of work, especially in the space of empowerment and thriving right now with these office hours events that are talking specifically about navigating student loan debt, because we know that student loan debt is often a barrier to success, and finances can be a reason that students don't complete their degree or certificate programs. So doing a lot of work in this space, meeting a lot of people, and just changing lives for the better. All right. About office hours. Office hours is a free semi-monthly virtual student loan clinic that provides borrowers with a trusted venue to help them navigate student loans and prepare for financial success beyond repayment. Now, I must say, with office hours, I try to give you the most up-to-date information possible. Sometimes there are changes that take place. Like our last edition, there was a change that was announced the very next day. But we try to give you the most up-to-date, accurate information possible so that you can make decisions that are fitting for yourself and your finances. But office hours, even still, is for informational purposes only. It should not be construed as financial or legal advice. We just try to point you in the right direction so that you can make the best decisions for your finances. All right, now that I've got all that out of the way, I wanted to tell everyone about a great experience I had visiting McDaniel College back on September the 29th for a live recording of the Ways to Pay for College program on Maryland Public Television. The stream was fun. We had questions coming in from people throughout the state, and those questions are answered by a team from that MPT coordinated. But just as important as it is to help people get out of student loan debt, it's important to help people who are entering this post-secondary pipeline and try to help them avoid taking out as much debt in the first place. So if you're interested in ways to pay for college, the video is posted on YouTube. You can visit Maryland Public Television's channel and take a look at the content, again, that helps people who are on the front end of this higher education journey. All right, let's jump into our questions. The first question for this evening is, I heard the application for cancellation came out. Where is it? That's an excellent question. And what happened was a preview of the application came out. So yesterday, the Department of Education provided a preview of the application for student debt relief. And a lot of people thought that that preview was the real thing, but that was just a preview. The application itself is not available yet. The application is set to become available later this month. We don't have an exact date yet, but it's coming during the month of October. And according to the White House, the application will be short and simple, and the preview definitely lived up to that. It will also not require any supporting documents or that borrowers even have a federal student aid ID. Lastly, it will be available in both English and Spanish and on both mobile and desktop devices. So the goal is to make it accessible and easy. And once it becomes available later this month, it will remain available until December 31st of 2003. If you want to see the preview, it came from the Department of Education, but it was also on Twitter. The White House Twitter feed posted a thread where they showed pictures of the application, scrolling on this little phone that you see in the right, on that picture in the right hand side of the screen. So you can see that it is short and simple, and hopefully people will apply for this relief as soon as the application becomes available. All right, next question. My loans transferred more than once in the past year, and I don't know who has them now. Where should I look? Okay, so the best place to find information about your loan servicers is federal student aid. There's some people that have multiple loans with multiple servicers. So if you can't remember all of the loans that you have, that's okay, you're definitely not alone. But studentaid.gov is the best place to go to capture all of those federal student loans. If you log into studentaid.gov, there are two ways that you can find out who your servicers are. On the dashboard, there's actually an option to view your servicer details, and you can get the servicer's address, phone number, all their contact information. The other way is to go to the My Aid screen, then view loan details, and on the details page, you can scroll down to the bottom and you will see a breakdown of the loans. And the loans are grouped by servicer. So you'll be able to see loans that you have outstanding now, loans that maybe you've paid off, loans that were paid off by consolidation. Everything you borrowed in the realm of federal student loans can be accessed there, but you have to log into studentaid.gov. The danger of just going to a servicer's website is that that servicer's website is only going to show the loans that are serviced by that particular company. So if you have older loans that you might not remember, looking into one servicer's online portal might cause you to miss out on some other loans that you have. And the end of this payment pause is coming up December 31st. So you want to make sure that you have a complete knowledge of your federal student loans, regardless of how many servicers you have, and the information is easily accessible online at studentaid.gov. So a lot of people have also asked, when is the first payment going to be due? I have been checking my account on studentaid.gov quite frequently. When I checked it, on September 22nd, it said due date unavailable, total due unavailable. So I thought, okay, they must be working through, some changes. That's fine. We've got until the end of December until the payment pause expires. So I checked back a few days later on September the 27th. The due date had been updated to February 8th of 2023. The total due has not been updated. And I checked again today just to see if there had been any changes. And the due date still says February 8th of 2023. I will continue to check because sometimes these things change. This whole payment pause is a new thing. It's been around for more than 2 years, but it's come in increments. So each time it gets extended, there's some more work that has to be done on the back end by the servicer. And the reflection of their work will show on your account when you take a look at your servicer details. So again, to get that information, you want to log into studentaid.gov and check with your servicer for your payment due date. All right, next question is, if I get the $10,000 in loan cancellation, will my balance be right by the time repayment starts again? That's a very good question. Repayment is set to start after December 31st of this year. And pardon me, I just saw I have a typo. I have repayment is set to resume after 12/31/23. That would be nice. That's actually the end date for the application for loan cancellation, but repayment is set to resume at the end of this year, so after 12/31/22. But according to the Department of Education, relief will be processed within 6 weeks of completing the student debt relief application. That application, again, will be available until December 31st, 2023. Department of Education recommends completing that application before November 15th of 2022 to have your relief processed by year end. The significance of that date is the department has come out and said that this relief will be processed in no more than 6 weeks. So if you apply by November the 15th, 6 weeks from that application date would basically put you at the very end of this year, very close to December 31st. So by the time repayment resumes, if your first payment, like mine, is scheduled to be due in the first week of February, then your cancellation should be processed. And when you enter repayment, your new lower student loan balance should be reflected on your account. So when the application comes out, Our goal is to get it done as soon as possible so that we can have that relief processed, hopefully by the end of the year. All right, shifting gears a little bit. This is a question about PSLF. The person says, my loans transferred to MOHELA. I had a qualifying payment count around 70 before the transfer. Now it says 25. What happened? For this question, I would like to dissect the payment tracker a bit, because sometimes it can get very confusing. So I wanted to show you all just a replica of an actual qualifying payment count from a borrower that I'm working with. So you'll see that all of the borrower's loans are listed. The names are abbreviated, but if you look at that loan program column, you can see DL at the start of all of those loans. So that means that this borrower has direct loans. The borrower also has loans that were dispersed on several dates. There's some from 2010, some from 2012, some from 2019. If you look at the column that says PSLF eligible payments, this is the number that the servicer has come up with after they have looked at the repayment history on each of those loans. So they went back to see, under regular rules of PSLF, they would go back to look and see how many payments were made. And in this case, you'll see that the borrower has differing counts because the loans were dispersed on different dates and therefore they have different repayment histories. So some of the loans have 76 payments. Some of the loans have 81 payments. One more loan has 83 payments. If you move over to the column where it says PSLF qualifying payments, this is the count that actually matters when you're trying to determine your eligibility for PSLF. So we have counts of 65 for the first two loans, 70 for the second two loans, and 72 for the last loan. So when you think about PSLF, that magic number that we're all trying to reach is 120. Right now, this borrower has a range of qualifying payments from 65 to 72. Again, the PSLF qualifying payments are the ones that actually count toward the 120. If the servicer has not verified employment for all of the eligible payments, you'll see the gap similar to what this borrower has. But once the servicer has updated all of the employment, those eligible payments should all convert over to qualifying payments. But the question that this particular borrower asked was, I had 70 where my loans were with FedLoan. Now I have 20 or so, or 25, now that the loans have transferred over to the new PSLF servicer, which is a company called MOHELA. Unfortunately, this experience is one that I've heard more than once, and it appears that what's happening is things are moving over from one company to the other because FedLoan is exiting the business, and MOHELA is now the one servicer that's dedicated to the PSLF program. But when those records are transferred, it appears that not everything is being transferred at the same time. So maybe there is borrower information and loan information going over, but the employment certifications are not carrying over. I'm hoping that as more time goes by, we'll see all of it come over. I know some people have seen it all come over, but others are having these experiences where they had a higher count before and now the count looks lower and they're wondering, should I call? Do I need to send in another employment certification? What's going on? So part of me says, be patient, it will update because you had it on record, you sent the forms in, and if you call, you're probably going to have to wait on the phone for 2 to 3 hours anyway. But at the same time, I understand the anxiety that's there because you think that you're at 70 something months out of 120, and then someone comes back and tells you you're at 25. That's a significant difference. So I would say log on to MOHELA's online portal. And when you get there, there's a menu across the top. PSLF is on that menu. When you click the PSLF tab, there's an option to look at your PSLF forms. You'll be able to see the forms along with the date that they were submitted. And there's a status bar there that shows you if the form has been processed or if the form is processing. There's also a payment tracker. If that payment tracker is available to you, you want to use that payment tracker so that you can examine everything that they have on file for all of your payments. What you might find is that the payments are there, but the employment is not certified for those months. If you know that you've already sent in a form, then the employment piece of that is probably a work in progress. If you have not sent in an updated PSLF application, you want to make sure you do that, ideally by October 31st, so that you are given credit through the limited waiver. I'm hoping that the transfer issues will be ironed out, but people should just keep in mind that FedLoan Servicing was the only servicer for PSLF since the program came into existence. They were taking care of it from the first batch of borrowers became eligible to apply really in late 2017. So from late 2017 until this year, they have been the only servicer in charge of this program. And over the summer, they began to transfer everything over to MOHELA. So some things are getting lost in translation, but I don't think they'll be lost forever. You can call, you might have to wait a while, but if you really want an answer, then I encourage you to reach out to them after you look in the online portal to see the process of the forms that you've submitted. So back to this qualifying payment count. This is something that every borrower who applies for PSLF will eventually see. And based on this payment count, I want to just explain a few things about what's possible through the waiver and what will happen after the waiver expires on October 31st. So this particular borrower, if we look at the disbursement dates, we have 2010, 2012, 2019, and that's why the loans have differing numbers of eligible payments and differing numbers of qualifying payments. Through the limited waiver, this borrower can consolidate, and I'm working with the borrower, they have consolidated, but through the waiver, consolidating would allow all of these loans from 2010, 2012, and 2019 to be put together. And once they're put together, they will be given credit for the purposes of PSLF for the same amount of qualifying payments that are attached to the loan with the longest history of qualifying payments. So if we look at these loans, we have some with 65, some with 70, some with 72. Once the loans are consolidated, all of them will be brought up to a PSLF qualifying payment of 72. So even though all of the loans are direct and don't have to be consolidated, this is an example where consolidation would actually work in the favor of the borrower because they're bringing all of their loans onto the same repayment clock. Under the original rules of PSLF, this person would have to actually apply for PSLF 3 different times. The first time, well, ideally you submit the PSLF application every 12 months to continue documenting your employment. But the time that actually will determine whether loans are forgiven is the moment that you apply after you've reached the 120th payment. So for this borrower, the first 2 loans from 2010, they would have to apply after they've made another 55 payments, and then that set of loans could be forgiven. Next loan would come 50 months. Well, that's a little bit closer, but 50 months. 50 months of payments made, apply to have that balance forgiven. The last loan has 48 qualifying payments remaining. So after 48 months, they could apply to have that particular loan forgiven. That means the forgiveness would come in 3 phases because these loans are operating on 3 different repayment clocks. By consolidating them through the waiver only, all of these loans would be brought up to speed and up to the speed of the loan that has the greatest amount of repayment history. So the loans that currently have 65 qualifying payments would jump to 72. And I know some people say, oh, 7 months, that's no big deal. Well, if it's 7 months and your payments on those loans are $300 a month, that's a couple $1,000s. So I think that, if you can save that money, I suggest you try it. But this is a real example of a borrower who has multiple loans, all direct loans, which means the loans themselves qualify for PSLF. But leaving them separate like this would mean this borrower has to apply 3 different times, whereas consolidating through the waiver, which means they'd have to consolidate before October 31st, will bring them all onto the same clock. So the 65 and the 70 would be sped up to meet the one loan that has 72 months of history, okay? But if you apply for PSLF, eventually you're going to receive something like this, and it will tell you, the number of payments attached to each loan, and these payment numbers can change. As more and more of your employment becomes certified, they will go ahead and increase the number of qualifying months. The key to getting the most credit possible is to apply through the limited waiver. And right now it's set to expire on October 31st. All right, so the next question was, how many PSLF applications do I need to complete? And the answer to that question is, at minimum, you need to complete one PSLF application for every qualifying employer you have worked for after October 1st of 2007, while your loans were in repayment. For employment to be considered qualifying, it has to be for certain types of organizations. Government agencies are qualifying employers, and 501c3 tax-exempt organizations are qualifying employers. There are some other organizations that are nonprofits that perform qualifying services to the public, and they may be qualifying employers as well. But once the organization type has been determined, that's really your guide. It's the way the organization is set up that determines whether it qualifies for PSLF. The other stipulations are that you have to be a direct employee. So you can't be a contract worker. If you receive a 1099, then you would be considered a contract worker, and your employment, unfortunately, would not qualify for PSLF. So you've got to be a direct employee. You also need to be a full-time employee or have a combination of part-time roles that are worked at the same time, and all of those roles are worked for qualifying employers. If you use the PSLF help tool, you'll be able to include an employment verification for multiple employers, but in one PSLF application. What will happen is you go to the PSLF help tool, you use the employer ID number for each organization that you've worked for, and you search for the employer by EIN. Once the results are pulled up, you'll be able to select that employer, and a page is added to your PSLF application for that employer. If you have 3 employers, you'll have one page 1, which is just the borrower information about you, and then you will have 3 page 2s. What you would do is each of those pages would go to the employer that's on the page, and someone from that organization would have to verify the form just by checking the details that you've entered. It would be the length of your employment, the status of your employment, which is full-time or part-time, as well as the average number of hours that you work per week. So anyone who can verify that that information is true and they're authorized to release that information, they can sign the form for you, give it back to you, and then you will put all the forms together and submit them to MOHELA. That's the one servicer that's responsible for PSLF. I have heard from some borrowers that they waited too long to submit the form. So maybe they got the form signed in April and they waited until September to submit them. And the servicer came back and said, the form needs to be submitted within 90 days of the signatures that are on the form. I've seen some conflicting information about this. Some people have gotten through, other people have had the forms sent back, but just to be on the safe side, first, get those forms in before October 31st to make sure that your time is counted before the waiver expires. But second, don't sit on the forms too long. Once you have them signed, you want to make sure that you get them in so that the servicer can begin processing your application and hopefully producing a payment count, a qualifying payment count for you relatively soon. All right, another question here says, I had commercially held FFEL loans and consolidated them on September 23rd. Will I be eligible for the one-time loan cancellation now? So this comes back to the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan, which is the plan that offers up to $20,000 worth of cancellation for federal student loan borrowers who meet certain requirements. The first requirement is that the loans have to be federally held. This particular borrower had what was called a commercially held FFEL or FFELF loan. This means that private banks are still involved with the ownership of the loan, even though the loan itself is a federal student loan. So to verify whether your FFEL loans are federally held or commercially held, you need to go to studentaid.gov. When you log in, you're going to come to the dashboard, and the dashboard will show you servicer details. When you look at the servicer details, if you see Department of Ed before the name of the servicer, that means that your loans are federally held. Also, if you see default management collection system, that means that the loan or loans are in default. Those are serviced by the debt management collection system, but that counts as being held by the Department of Education. If you just see the name of a servicer on that screen, then that means that your loans are commercially held. And some people have those types of commercially held loans. Prior to September 29th, if you had commercially held FFEL loans and consolidated them into the direct loan program, then those loans would be able to gain access to this one-time cancellation of up to $20,000. But on September 29th, the Department of Education came out, updated their website to say that people who consolidate after that date, on or after that date, would not be able to gain access to relief through this program. And changes like this, a lot of them are coming because of the lawsuits that have been filed to prevent this one-time cancellation from being distributed to federal student loan borrowers. So there have been tweaks to the application along the way. One of the first lawsuits that was filed was by a person who was in the pipeline for PSLF. And the argument, don't quote me on this, but the argument was that the person lived in a state that would tax the cancellation that was offered through this Biden-Harris student debt relief plan. So if the person was going to receive $20,000 worth of cancellation, that $20,000 would be taxed, and the person would be responsible for paying taxes on it as if it were income. Through PSLF, the forgiveness that that person was expecting would be tax-free. So the argument was, if the administration is forcing this cancellation on a person, and that cancellation does the person harm, then the person can sue, to prevent this from happening. So after that lawsuit, the Department of Education added some language that people can opt out of this cancellation program. So if a person opts out of it, then they don't receive the cancellation. And if they live in a state that taxes cancellation, they wouldn't be subject to the tax because they opted out of the cancellation. Whereas PSLF, even though this person wasn't going to qualify for PSLF, at least not for a few more years, that forgiveness would not be taxed. So they added the change that you can opt out. If you don't want it, you have the option to refuse it. But then another change came about September 29th, and this one was specifically about commercially held FFEL loans. So if you had those types of FFEL loans and you apply for your consolidation before September 29th, then you're in the pipeline for the cancellation. But unfortunately for others who did not complete the application to consolidate before the 29th, as of right now, they are not eligible for the one-time cancellation offered by the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. The Department of Education's website has said that they are, exploring legal options to help borrowers who have commercially held FFEL loans. So I'm watching, waiting to see if there'll be movement on that front. And if there is, I will reach out and share it. Okay, and the next question, still about cancellation. I keep hearing about $10,000 or $20,000 in cancellation. How can I tell if I'm eligible for any of it? So I was thinking about all of these questions and how to, just put something together that would allow people to get their answer in one spot. And it's based on your answers to 5 questions. The first question is, are your loans federally held? That means that your loans are held by the Department of Education. You can verify that by visiting studentaid.gov. You can look at your servicers, and if your servicer has Department of Ed in front of it, or if it's that default management collection system, then the loans are federally held. If your loans were included in this CARES Act forbearance that went into effect March 13th of 2020, and you have not been required to make payments for the last 2.5 years, that also lets you know your loans are federally held. So if you know that your loans are federally held, check yes and move on to the next question. Next question is, were your original loans dispersed before June 30th of 2022? You can find that out on studentaid.gov by looking at the loan breakdown. At the very bottom of the view loan details page, when you scroll down to the breakdown, there's an option to see all of your loans sorted by servicer. When you click view loans on each of those tabs, you'll be able to see the loans and you can sort them in order. So you can see the dates that each loan was dispersed. And if your original loans were dispersed June 30th, before June 30th of 2022, then yes, your loans are eligible for relief through this program. And also, this applies to student debt that you've taken out for yourself, student debt that you may have taken out via Parent Plus loans for your child. It could be undergraduate or graduate student loan debt. So there are many loans that are available. We'll take a look in detail at the types of loans that are eligible for this program. But if your loans are federally held and dispersed before June 30th of 2022, we can move on to the third question. The third question is about adjusted gross income, and the Department of Education is going to be looking at 2 years, 2020 and 2021, and they're going to ask if your adjusted gross income was, for a single and married filing separately borrowers, it would be $125,000 per year. That's the income ceiling. For borrowers who are married and filing jointly or filing as head of household, the AGI has to be under $250,000 for either year. So if one of those years you were above the threshold, but the other year you were below it, you're fine. It just takes one of those years to be under the income cap. If you're not sure about your adjusted gross income, you can look at your personal income tax returns for 2020 and 2021, and you're going to look at Form 1040, and you'll find adjusted gross income there. So if you answer yes to those first three questions, then you should be eligible for up to $10,000 of relief. If your loan balance is higher than $10,000, then you would get $10,000 taken off of that balance. If your loan balance is less than $10,000, your entire balance would be canceled. They would not give you a refund, for the difference. So if you owed $7,000 and you answered yes to all these questions, then they would cancel the $7,000, and the $3,000, the government would just keep. So no one will get cash refunds through this relief. This is just cancellation by way of reducing the overall level of outstanding debt. So the plan offers up to $20,000 for certain borrowers. So if you know that you're eligible for the $10,000, there are a couple more questions to answer to determine if you're eligible for the additional $10,000 worth of relief. The first question is, did you receive a Pell Grant? You can verify whether you received a Pell Grant by visiting studentaid.gov and logging in. When you log on to the dashboard, if you have loans, you're going to see a blue kind of wheel there, and it's going to have your loan balance in the middle. If you have a Pell Grant or have received a Pell Grant in the past, you'll see a green wheel right next to it that has the amount of grants you received, and there's some explanation about the grants underneath that wheel. There's also a tab. There's one tab for loans. There's another tab for grants. So if you click on the grants tab, you'll be able to see if you received a Pell Grant. There is no requirement for you to have received a certain dollar amount in Pell Grants. There is no requirement for you to have received a certain number of Pell Grants. Also, the receiving a Pell Grant, you didn't have to receive the Pell Grant at the same time that you took out loans. So you received a Pell Grant in undergrad and you didn't take out any loans until graduate school. That's okay. You still received a Pell Grant, and that's all that matters for this question. Also, if you took a Pell Grant prior to 1984, I believe that's the year, you might not see it listed in studentaid.gov, but that doesn't mean that the Department of Education doesn't have a record of that. It's just not reported via that platform. So don't worry. If you receive one prior to 1984 and you don't have evidence of it, the Department of Education should have evidence of it. It's just not on the platform. So if you answer yes to the Pell Grant question, there's one more question to ask. That question is your balance on loans borrowed for your own education greater than $10,000? This question is geared specifically toward kind of separating Parent Plus loan borrowers from everyone else. If you were a borrower who only has Parent Plus loans, then $10,000 will be the maximum amount of relief that you can receive. However, if you have Parent Plus loans that you borrowed for your child and you have student loans that you borrowed for yourself, then you could be eligible for up to $20,000 based on the student loans that you took out for yourself. So if you answered yes to the first four questions, for the fifth question, if you have both Parent Plus loans and student loans for yourself, you want to look at your student loan balance for yourself. If that balance is greater than $10,000, then you should be eligible for up to $20,000. If you don't have any Parent Plus loans and all the loans you have for yourself have an outstanding balance of more than $10,000, then you too should be eligible for up to $20,000. Okay, so the key is first you want to have answers, yes answers to the first 3 questions to get to 10,000, and then Pell Grant recipients can get the extra 10,000 as long as the balance on their loans that they took out for their own education is greater than 10,000. And if you want details on the plan, you can visit studentaid.gov/debt relief or the extended URL, which is located on the bottom of this slide. All right. So as far as accessing the relief is concerned, I know the chart is sometimes confusing to people, so I just wanted to walk through each of the questions again and provide a slide for that. We've got 4 to ask. The first one is, what kind of loans do you have? Second is your AGI for 2020 or 21 under the income cap? Third, were your loans dispersed before June 30th of 2022? And fourth, did you receive a Pell Grant? And I just want to show you how to verify. As for what kind of loans you have, this list on the right-hand side is provided straight from the Office of Federal Student Aid. So undergraduate and graduate direct loans, Parent Plus and Grad Plus loans, consolidation loans, as long as the underlying loans were dispersed on or before June 30th of 2022. Family Federal Education Loans, those are FFEL or FFELP loans, as long as they are held by the Department of Education. Perkins loans that are held by the Department of Education, as well as defaulted loans, which are held by the Department of Education, or commercially serviced, subsidized, unsubsidized Parent Plus, Grad Plus, and Perkins loans held by the Department of Education. So this covers most of student loan borrowers with federal student loan debt. The exception is people who have those commercially held federal student loans. If you want to verify, again, you log into studentaid.gov, look for your servicer, and look for it to say Department of Ed before the name of the servicer or default management collection system. The next question is about AGI. You can find that on your personal income tax return. And again, it's either year, 2020 or 2021, that you have to be under the income cap. To find your disbursement dates, you go to studentaid.gov, look at that My Aid screen, go to view details, then view loan breakdown, and then you can see the individual loans and you can sort them by disbursement date. Another question that comes up about this is regarding people who just started school for the first time in the fall of 2022. Unfortunately, they will not be eligible for relief under this plan. If they had taken out loans prior to June 30, 2022, then there's a possibility for them. But this program was very clear about the requirement that the loans had to have been dispersed before June 30th. So incoming freshmen, or people who are going to college or university for the first time, they would not qualify for relief through this program because their loans were not dispersed before that June 30th, 2022 deadline. Lastly, did you receive a Pell Grant? You want to go to studentaid.gov, the My Aid section, and look for the green wheel with grant dollars inside of the wheel. And I'm sorry, I got my year wrong. Is if you received a Pell Grant prior to 1994, not 84, that information won't display in studentaid.gov, but you'll still receive the full benefit. So if you want to verify your Pell Grant status, visit studentaid.gov. All right, so let's shift gears to PSLF with this next question. Is the waiver going to be extended? How can I get PSLF if I apply after October 31st of 2022? Well, today is October the 12th, and I have not heard any word about the extension of the waiver. So right now I'm operating under the assumption that it is going to expire on October 31st, as was originally laid out with the creation of the limited waiver. As for how to pursue public service loan forgiveness after the waiver expires, if you apply after October 31st, your application is going to be reviewed using the original program's requirements. The screen that you're seeing here gives you a comparison of the original rules of PSLF, the rules of temporary expanded PSLF, which is another program that was designed to help more people gain loan forgiveness through PSLF, and lastly, the limited PSLF waiver. For original PSLF, we have 5 requirements. The first one is you have to make 120 monthly payments. The second one is that the payments have to be made on direct loans only. third requirement is that at the time that you make all of those payments, you have to be enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan. The fourth requirement is that you have to remain working for a qualifying employer when those 120 monthly payments were made. And you still need to be working for a qualifying employer at the time that you apply for PSLF and at the time that you receive it. And remember, qualifying employment is full-time and direct. So no contract work. We're only talking about direct employment of a full-time nature or multiple part-time jobs that put together can be combined to reach that full-time status. In the middle, we have temporary expanded PSLF. TEPSLF will be around after the waiver disappears, but the only rule that has been relaxed through TEPSLF is the rule about being enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan. You still have to make 120 monthly payments. Payments still have to be on direct loans only. And of course, you still have the employment qualifications. So the only thing that was relaxed is repayment plans. And that program also has another condition about how much your payments had to be during the last 12 months of repayment. And unfortunately, this program had a rejection rate that was just about as high as PSLF did before the waiver. That's around 98%. And if you look on the right-hand side, the limited PSLF waiver, right away you can see we have gone from 5 requirements down to 2. The 2 remaining requirements are, of course, you still have to have that qualifying employment. So that means direct full-time work for a qualifying employer or multiple part-time positions, all worked for a qualifying employer. The second requirement is you have to have 120 periods of repayment. So instead of having to actually have made payments for the entire 120 months, they're just looking for periods of repayment. That means they're looking at months where your loans was in a repayment status. If you missed a payment, that's okay. If your payment was late, that's okay. If your loan was technically in repayment and you had the qualifying employment, those months can count toward PSLF. Additionally, if you had the qualifying employment and your loans were included in the CARES Act forbearance, all of these months of the CARES Act forbearance count toward your 120 as well. So the waiver really has just changed so many things, and we're just seeing so many people get to that 120 periods of repayment mark because of these newer relaxed rules. If you apply for PSLF under the original rules, then there's just a much higher bar for you to meet for your application to get through. If you have more than 120 periods of repayment and you've had qualifying employment the entire time, it's possible that you could submit this application for PSLF, consolidate if you need to, and the servicer might come back and say, you know, you're at 140, you're over 120, and the rest of your debt will be canceled. We're coming, I think we might be past the point where I used to say to some people, it's possible that your debt could be cleared without you having to make another payment at all. But if you're just submitting the paperwork, it can take several months for the paperwork to be processed completely. So you might have to make a few more payments, but hopefully, if you have more than 120 months of that employment and repayment history and you get all of your paperwork in before October 31st of 2022, 6 months or so, I would hope that you get the announcement that your debt has been cleared. If you have less than 120 months of employment and repayment history, I still encourage you to file an application for PSLF through the waiver, because you might get credit for past payments that would not have been accepted under the program's original rules. So if you've been paying for 5 years, but you were paying on the wrong repayment plan, applying through the waiver might mean that all of those payments could count. And now you're halfway to 120, but you won't know unless you apply. And you have to apply by October 31st to make sure that your application is reviewed using the rules of the limited waiver. As I mentioned, the waiver is set to expire October 31st. I hope it gets extended, but if it doesn't, it's set to expire October 31st. The TEPSLF program does not have a hard deadline. The TEPSLF program will be around until all of the funding has been exhausted. I'm not sure how far into that funding we are, but I suspect TEPSLF will probably be around for years to come. All right, so I just wanted to pay some special attention to the limited waiver process because it's October 12th and the limited waiver is set to expire on October 31st. I'd like to think of this process in 4 steps. The first step is to confirm your eligibility, your employer's eligibility, because without the employment, then the rest of this doesn't matter. You can use the PSLF help tool. There's an option there to search for employers before you actually begin your application. All you need is the employer ID number for the employer. You can find that employer ID number on your W-2. Many times you can also Google the EIN, but you just want to make sure that the EIN you're using matches the EIN that's on your W-2. The second step is to view your loan types, and you can do that online at studentaid.gov as well. The third step is to consolidate your loans if necessary via studentaid.gov. If necessary would be if your loans are not direct loans. If you have FFEL loans or Perkins loans and you want them to be considered for PSLF, then you need to consolidate them into the direct loan program to get them on track for PSLF. After you consolidate, the servicer will review the history of the consolidation loan first. The way it's been working is the first count that you receive after you consolidate is usually very low because it only looks at the consolidation loan. After that review, another review will take place and the servicer will begin to count the repayment history of the older loans that went into the consolidation loan. So you'll see your count rise as long as you had qualifying employment throughout that time. The fourth and final step is to verify your employment by completing the PSLF application. Highly recommend using the online help tool so that you can avoid making clerical errors or answering questions that don't apply to you and risking that your application is rejected. All of this, you want to make sure that you complete by October 31st of 2022 so we can get in through the waiver and get the maximum credit for the past repayment history. So another question that usually comes up with this subject is, should I consolidate first and then submit the PSLF application? Now that we are so close to the expiration of the limited waiver, just get it all in. Don't worry about the order of it. Just make sure that you get all of your applications completed by October 31st. After the waiver was announced last fall, the servicer was recommending that people consolidate their loans first and then wait for the consolidation loan to disperse before submitting the PSLF application. The problem with that now is that if you apply for consolidation now, your consolidation loan might not disperse for 6 weeks, and that would put you well beyond the October 31st deadline for the waiver. So if you have to consolidate to get your loans on track for PSLF, you want to make sure that you consolidate them before October 31st. And you also want to make sure you submit your PSLF application before October 31st. So in the past, the recommendation was to consolidate first, wait for it to disperse, and then submit the PSLF application. Now, don't worry about the order. It can all get sorted out on the back end. Just make sure you get everything in before October 31st of this year so that you can be in the pipeline for relief through the waiver. As for some resources, please remember studentaid.gov is where you go to complete all the applications. You can view your loans there. You can view your servicers. You can access the PSLF help tool. You can complete the application to consolidate, and you can complete the PSLF application itself, your portion of it. Once you complete the application, you want to download it, sign it, make sure your signature is hand-drawn, and then your pages for the employers will go to your respective employees for their signatures. They'll give the application back to you. You put everything together and send it to MOHELA. The address and fax number for MOHELA are located in the actual PSLF application. So you can look at the application to find out where to send your paperwork. After you send it in, MOHELA will process it, and if they're not your servicer already, they will become your servicer. The next resource that I'd like to share is the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, of course. You can visit us online at mccfw.org, and we have a special page that's dedicated to public service loan forgiveness and the limited waiver. That's mccfw.org/MDTAPS. And MDTAP stands for Maryland Telepublic Servant. If you know people at your job, in your church, people that might participate in different extracurricular activities with your kids, whoever, anyone you can think of who works for the government or for nonprofit organizations, please do tell them. We have templates out there for sharing information, and we're just tracking the progress for Marylanders who have applied for PSLF. So far, more than 6,200 Marylanders have had more than $406 million worth of loan debt, federal student loan debt, canceled through PSLF, and we want to see that number climb even higher. The next resource is the Institute for Student Loan Advisors. The founder of that organization has created a Reddit mega thread called the PSLF mega thread, and they have so much information out there from borrowers who have applied for PSLF and are going through this process and just sharing their experiences, their timelines, the responses that they receive from the servicers, their actual forgiveness, loan forgiveness when they reach it. They're just very forthcoming with real-time information about what the application process is like. And lastly, there's another organization called the Student Borrower Protection Center. They have created a nice website, forgivemystudentdebt.org, that lays out the steps for applying for PSLF through the waiver in a very easy to understand format. So there are plenty of resources available, but remember, the one place you need to go to get all the applications done, that will always be studentaid.gov. You can complete all of these applications online for free on your own, but you want to make sure that you do them all by October 31st so that you're in the pipeline for PSLF and you'll have your application evaluated using the rules of the limited waiver. All right. Wow, I can't believe I've been talking for almost an hour. Those are all of the questions that we received ahead of tonight's edition of Office Hours. If you have any additional questions, I will hang tight for a bit, and I will check social media too, because sometimes I get questions on Twitter, and I'll just see what people are saying about PSLF. One thing that I have heard as of late from a couple of people is that the fax number for MOHELA is sending back a status of no answer instead of, confirmed or okay as the status. It's coming back as no answer, and that has some people very concerned about whether their applications have been received. So there is a traditional mail option, and if MOHELA is already your servicer, you can use their document upload feature and not have to worry about fax or paper. Some people have sent it both ways. At this point, I totally understand that. I totally understand just wanting to make sure that they do receive the paperwork before the waiver expires. And the contact information for where to send the forms to is located on the actual PSLF application. So you can get the address and fax number there. Just checking Twitter to see if we have any other questions. I don't see any questions at the moment. I'm going to check the Q&A just to see if we got anything there. No open questions there. All right. We've got about 5 minutes left. I guess I can share. I have a couple of events coming up soon. On October the 19th, I'll be participating in a webinar with APG FCU, and that's about making the most of opportunities for student loan forgiveness. So if you would like to join that webinar, I will put the link in the chat as soon as I can find it. Here it is, so that you can join that webinar. It is free, and it will be on October the 19th at noon. We'll be talking about PSLF and more. And I'm going to drop that link into, actually, put that here. I'll put that in the chat. And also, I will be visiting with Howard University's Small Business Development Center for another webinar on October the 20th. And the subject of that webinar will be my book, Borrowing While Black. And that is open to all. You would just need to register through Howard University's SBDC. So I'm going to put that link in the chat as well in just a moment. Right. And I'm checking. I don't see anything else on social media, and the chat looks like it's empty. I'm going to put one more link here for you, and that's the link from Howard University. And after that, I think we'll be able to wrap up. Okay. All right, I'm going to drop this link in the chat, and then we can wrap up for the evening. All right. So I thank you so much for joining me for this October 12th edition of Office Hours. I know there is a lot going on in the world of student loans right now. The best message that I can send to everyone is just to be patient and to seek accuracy over being early, being the first to know. There are a lot of scammers who are seizing upon this one-time cancellation plan as an opportunity to take money from people under false pretenses, offer guarantees that are just not possible, or to get your personal information to perform tasks for you that you can do for yourself for free while protecting your personal information. So look out for news from reputable sources. The Department of Education, of course, is the #1 source of information on your federal student loans. I hope that you will include me in that group of reputable sources. And just know that if you're looking for updates, you can subscribe to updates from the Department of Education. And also you can join the contact list of the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. With this one-time cancellation and with public service loan forgiveness, we might not be the first to put the information out there because we want to verify it and make sure that it's accurate before we share it. But once we post it, I hope that you feel comfortable and trusting that the information is going to be accurate and useful for you. So when that application for one-time cancellation comes out, we will definitely share that. And just thank you again so much for joining us for this edition of Office Hours. If you'd like to keep up with us on social media, we are at the McFew, that's at THEMCCFW, and that is on Twitter as well as Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel with archived episodes of Office Hours, and those episodes have been annotated so that you can look for the questions that you want answered and go straight to that content. So if there are no further questions, the Q&A still looks empty, and let me check. I don't see anything else on social media. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night. Thanks again for joining me, and take care until next time, which is scheduled for October the 26th at 7 p.m. Thank you.